Kylan doesn't speak. Zarya repeated it every day, until the billionaire lifted him, and the boy laughed like he'd known him forever. Winter pressed hard against the Montclair estate, wrapping the mountains in silence thicker than the snow outside. Inside, Zarya Mayweather adjusted her son's coat for the third time, whispering reassurance even though Kylan hadn't answered her in months. He didn't speak. He didn't laugh. He didn't reach for anyone but her. Not after the night everything fell apart. Taking this maid job wasn't ambition, it was survival. Aspen's rich homes felt like a different planet. But she needed the work, and Kylan needed a place warm enough to make it through December. Reed Montclair barely noticed her when she arrived. Men like him rarely noticed women like her. Poor, tired, carrying a silent child who'd forgotten what safety felt like. But Kylan noticed him. Just a glance, a stillness, a tiny lift of his head that Zarya almost missed. She brushed it off, because her son didn't react to men, not anymore. What no one in that house understood not yet was that some children speak long before their voices return, and on a night when snow softened every breath, one billionaire was about to become the first person Kylan refused to walk away from. Before we continue, please like, share, and subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Now, let's dive back into the story. Snow fell like a quiet judgment over the Montclair winter estate, coating the rooflines and winding paths of Aspen Highlands in a thick white silence. The mansion, with its spires of glass and stone, stood like a castle untouched by the world's bruises. Inside, golden lights flickered from chandeliers that cost more than most homes. But no warmth spilled from them, not the kind that mattered. Zarya Mayweather stood at the towering front door, her thrift store coat tugged tight against the wind, her gloved hand clenched around the smaller one at her side. Kylan's fingers were cold, but he didn't complain. He never did. "This is your first day," she whispered to him, her breath forming a cloud. "Just stay close. Don't be afraid, baby." But Kylan didn't respond. His dark curls shifted slightly in the wind, but his eyes stayed down. His little body pressed tightly into her leg, like roots refusing to be pulled from fractured ground. The grand doors opened with a hush. Inside, everything was warmth, polish, and quiet opulence. The contrast nearly stole her breath. "Zarya Mayweather." The voice came clipped and cold. Marlene Dorset, the house manager, stood like a portrait come to life, stern, straight-backed and flawless. Her eyes flicked down to the boy. "This is your son." Zarya nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am." "Kylan. He stays close. He won't be a problem." "I should hope not." Marlene's eyes narrowed. "Children are not to disrupt the estate. Mr. Montclair values peace. This is not the kind of house that tolerates noise." Zarya swallowed hard, lowering her gaze. "Kylan hasn't spoken to anyone since the night his father hurt us." A silence stretched one even heavier than the snow outside. "I see," Marlene said, turning briskly. "Keep him out of sight. You'll begin with the drawing rooms." As they moved deeper into the mansion, Zarya's steps grew smaller. She could feel the layers of wealth and cold distance pressing in. It wasn't just the marble floors or the silk curtains, it was the way no one looked at them, the way the world inside this house didn't expect someone like her to exist within it. Somewhere deeper in the home, laughter drifted in polished, upper-class, effortless. Lights twinkled across an enormous tree by the main hall, ornaments glinting with stories Kylan would never be allowed to touch. And then he passed, a man. Tailored suit, sharp jaw, perfectly rehearsed silence. Reed Montclair. He didn't slow, didn't speak, barely noticed them as he moved toward the parlor. To him, Zarya and her son might as well have been shadows. But Kylan looked up, not a word, not even a sound. But his eyes followed the man with a strange focus, one that Zarya hadn't seen in months. A slow, quiet study. And then something even stranger happened. Kylan's grip loosened. Just for a second, he stepped out. Not fully, not far, but just enough to no longer be hidden behind his mother's leg. A sliver of movement. A choice. The first time he had stepped toward a man since that night. Zarya froze. Her breath caught. Tears threatened, but she blinked them back. Was it curiosity? Was it recognition? Or something deeper, something neither of them could name. Some hearts fall silent. But even silence can recognize safety long before words return. She reached down and gently pulled him close again. Kylan didn't resist, but he looked back once more, eyes lingering in the direction Reed had gone. Children don't disappear into silence by choice. They disappear because no one stayed long enough to understand. If that truth weighs on you, stay with this story. Why does a man who has everything not notice the one thing that might save him? Or has he already started to? The Montclair living room glowed under the soft twinkle of golden Christmas lights, casting shadows that danced quietly against the cream-colored walls. It was the kind of room meant for magazine spreads, not memories, for appearances, not healing. Zarya moved quietly, cloth in hand, wiping down the polished surfaces with the careful rhythm of someone used to being invisible. She didn't speak. She barely breathed. Every motion was calculated, too many reminders that in this house, mistakes had consequences. Kylan sat quietly on the plush carpet nearby, legs crossed, small fingers tracing the patterns in the rug. His silence was normal now, expected. It had been months since any sound passed his lips. Words had left him the night everything else did. And then came Reed. He entered with the heaviness of someone used to power but unfamiliar with peace. The weight of business papers tucked under his arm, tension written in the set of his jaw. Eyes flicking to no one, he walked straight past Zarya without a word. But Kylan looked up, his head tilted slightly, eyes tracking Reed like he recognized something the rest of the world couldn't see. Then, without prompting, without hesitation, Kylan crawled, tiny palms pressed against the soft carpet, moving slowly but deliberately. Zarya paused mid-swipe, breath caught in her throat. What was he doing? Reed stopped, felt it, turned. Their eyes met man and child, and for a moment, the room stood still. Reed didn't think. He knelt instinctively, the papers forgotten at his side. His expression wasn't gentle. Not at first. It was confused, almost afraid of breaking whatever fragile thing was unfolding. Kylan reached up, not shyly, not fearfully, as if this was something he had always wanted to do but had waited for the right person to try. And Reed, this man who had built walls taller than any mansion, reached down and lifted him gently, carefully, into his arms. A tense beat. No one moved. Not even the Christmas lights dared to flicker. Then it happened. Kylan laughed. A sound so full, so free, so impossibly alive that it filled the entire room like music. A bubbling, bright, uncontainable laugh like a child remembering joy for the first time. Zarya dropped her cleaning cloth. Her hands flew to her mouth, eyes wide, mouth open exactly as if someone had told her the sky had opened. She stared at the scene in front of her, not moving, not blinking. Disbelief warred with the overwhelming pull of emotion crashing through her. Kylan's laugh grew louder. He rested his head on Reed's shoulder, tiny hands clinging to his shirt. And then Reed, still kneeling, still holding the boy, laughed too. Not a chuckle, not polite, but real, deep, something that hadn't surfaced in him for years. It startled even him. He looked up at Zarya, as if needing permission to feel it. But Zarya couldn't speak, couldn't move, only tears. The glow of the Christmas tree lit the room behind them, soft and golden. It looked like something out of a dream, but it was real. It was happening. Reed's voice broke the silence, low and almost reverent. Zarya. He trusts me. The words hit like a revelation. Zarya's knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the edge of the sofa to steady herself. Her son, who hadn't let a man near him in months, was laughing in the arms of a stranger, a billionaire, a man no one expected to matter. But maybe this wasn't a coincidence. Some miracles do not arrive with warning, they arrive in the arms of the one person we never expected. Zarya makes a terrifying choice: stay silent and employed, or speak up about what she just saw, and risk everything. Zarya moved through the East Wing corridors with a dish rag in one hand and a heart full of questions in the other. The night before had not left her. It clung to her thoughts like the cold air that slipped beneath the high windows of the Montclair mansion. Kylan had laughed. Not a little. Not pretend, but fully, loudly, in someone else's arms, in his arms, and now he wouldn't leave him. Since sunrise, Kylan had followed Reed through the house like a shadow, silent, ever-present, and oddly peaceful. He didn't pull on his mother's skirt, didn't flinch when others passed. He simply kept close to the man no one could explain. Zarya caught glimpses of it in the corners of hallways. Reed reviewing papers near the grand staircase, Kylan sitting quietly on the floor beside him. No words, just presence. It left Zarya reeling. She was embarrassed at how grateful she felt, and equally afraid of it. Nothing about this made sense. Not after what Kylan had lived through. Not after what he had stopped living for. And yet, here they were. She tried to keep busy in the kitchen, scrubbing counters that didn't need scrubbing. But even the comfort of cleaning couldn't distract her from the impossible scene unfolding around her. Zarya. The voice pulled her upright. It was Marlene. The house manager stood rigid, arms crossed, eyes as unreadable as ever. You've been here a week. That's long enough to understand how things work in this house. Zarya nodded. Yes, ma'am. I saw the boy. Following him, Zarya's throat tightened. I didn't mean for... Marlene raised a hand. This is a private estate. The Montclair family does not get attached to staff, no matter how touching things may appear. Don't let your son forget his place. And don't forget yours. Zarya swallowed the sting. Of course, but something about the warning only deepened her unease. As if joy itself was unwelcome here. As if love had been banished long ago. That night, long after the halls had quieted and the lights had dimmed, Reed stood alone in his office. He held something small in his hands, a Christmas ornament, simple and hand-painted. A child's name barely faded on the side. His fingers trembled as he ran over it. He hadn't laughed like that in years. Not since. A photograph faced the wall. He didn't turn it. He didn't have to. Pain had no trouble remembering. Outside the office, Zarya passed with a fresh stack of folded linens. She didn't mean to stop. Didn't mean to hear. But she did. Through the cracked door, she heard his voice, barely a whisper. Why him? Why now? She froze, her heart clenched. She didn't know who the question was for: himself, the universe, or maybe a daughter long gone. But she didn't wait to find out. Zarya stepped away quietly, letting the moment remain his. Some wounds were not meant to be seen, only understood. Grief doesn't disappear. But sometimes, it softens when innocence reaches for it. Some children choose the one heart they know won't leave them. If that truth pulls at you, don't look away now. Zarya is faced with an ultimatum. Pull her son away from Reed, or lose the only job keeping them warm this winter. The Montclair mansion was bustling with polished chaos as staff rushed to perfect every detail for the holiday gala. Crystal ornaments were adjusted. Table settings were aligned with military precision, and the grand staircase shimmered with garland that cost more than most people's rent. Zarya kept her head down, moving quickly through the foyer with a tray of silver napkin rings in her hands. Kylan trailed beside her, calm but alert, never straying far. The great front doors opened with a grand sweep, and in walked Sabrielle Montclair. Everything about her posture said entitlement. Her fur-lined coat, her towering heels, her cold perfume that seemed to leave a trail of judgment in the air. She had arrived for the final holiday preparations and, as always, for control. But it wasn't the decorations that caught her eye. It was Kylan, running, straight across the marble foyer, and into Reed's arms. He had just stepped in from the study, barely removed his gloves. But without hesitation, he knelt again and caught the boy mid-stride, lifting him with a surprised smile. Kylan held tight, small arms wrapping around Reed's neck like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sabrielle froze in the doorway. She said nothing, but her eyes screamed. Dinner was tense. The long dining table, perfectly set, felt colder than the snowstorm outside. Staff moved quietly around the edges, and Zarya stood nearby, trying to disappear. Her hands trembled at her sides. Sabrielle sipped her wine, eyes never leaving Reed. Until finally, she spoke, loud, icy, Intentional. Why is a maid's child attached to you like this? The room paused. She placed her glass down softly. It looks... She tilted her head, lips curling. Inappropriate. Zarya flinched like she'd been slapped. Color drained from her face. Eyes locked to the floor. Her body stilled. Like shrinking could save her from the fire she didn't start. Reed didn't raise his voice. But he didn't look away. He feels safe. That's all. Sabriel blinked. Once. Then smiled in that dangerous way people do when they've already made up their minds. Later that evening, away from the dining room and the flicker of holiday lights, she pulled Marlene aside. Her voice dropped to a hiss. Get rid of the maid, before this becomes a scandal. Marlene's expression didn't change, but she nodded once, tightly. Sabriel turned and walked down the hall, heels echoing like a warning shot. Some people fear what they cannot control, especially the love they never learned to give. If you've ever protected a child from the wrong adult, stay with this. Zarya discovers she's being watched. And this time, not by a child who trusts her. The upstairs hallway was silent, but the tension inside it pulsed like a wound beneath bandages. Zarya had just finished folding linen napkins when she heard her name spoken not in passing, but like a blade being drawn. She paused outside Reed's office door, heart pounding. Inside, Sabriel's voice cut through the air. It's manipulation. Reed, she's using that child to earn your sympathy. You've seen it. It's not affection, it's strategy. Zarya's breath caught. Her hands began to shake. She knows your weakness. She's feeding into it. This woman doesn't belong here, and certainly not wrapped around your reputation like this. Zarya stepped back, eyes wide. Her chest tightened with a suffocating panic she hadn't felt in weeks. It was happening, the thing she'd feared since Kylan first smiled again. She'd dared to feel safe. That was her mistake. Inside the room, Reed didn't speak at first. Then, finally, no, I won't fire her. Sabriel's tone shifted. Sharper. Desperate. You think this is about kindness. It's about perception. You are letting a maid's son attach himself to you like family. The staff talks. The board notices. This isn't care, it's delusion. Zarya moved to leave, but in her panic, she bumped a side table. A frame clattered to the floor. Silence followed. Inside the office, Reed turned toward the door. Sabriel's eyes narrowed. But before anything could be said, soft footsteps echoed from the end of the hallway. Kylan. He had followed her again. Always quietly. Always just behind. He saw her face, saw the fear, and instantly, his little body trembled. Zarya dropped to her knees, arms out. But Kylan didn't run to her. He turned to Reed and walked straight into his arms. Reed kneeled, startled, but this time, he didn't hesitate. He wrapped both arms around the boy, holding him tightly, protectively. His hands moved instinctively, one on Kylan's back, one gently cradling his head. Sabriel stared, her mouth twisting. You're replacing your daughter, she hissed. With this child? The words hit like broken glass. Reed's entire body stilled. His grip on Kylan tightened, not in anger, but in something ancient, something buried and breaking all at once. Zarya stepped forward, unable to breathe. Every moment was slipping from her. And then, it happened. A whisper, small, fragile. Mama. Both adults froze. Zarya gasped. Reed blinked in disbelief. Kylan reached out one tiny hand toward Zarya, the other still clinging to Reed's sleeve. It wasn't a choice. It was a bridge, a name, a plea, a memory. Mama, the heart always remembers who held it, even in silence. Some wounds open not to destroy us, but to remind us who we cannot afford to lose. Don't turn away now. Sabriel escalates. A call is made, and someone arrives with the power to end everything. The drive to Aspen was quiet. Snow lined the edges of the winding road, but no one spoke. Zarya sat in the back seat, holding Kylan close, her hands trembling against his coat. Reed gripped the steering wheel tighter than necessary, jaw set, eyes on the road, but not on the silence inside the car. They were headed to Dr. Shailene Rousseau, the top child trauma specialist in the region. Reed had called her personally, No assistance. No delay. Zarya hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected any of this. The clinic sat tucked behind a wall of pine trees, warm and welcoming, nothing like a hospital. Kylan clung to her as they entered, but didn't resist. He walked in. That alone felt like a miracle. Dr. Russo met them with the calm energy of someone who'd seen too many broken children and helped them piece themselves back together. Her soft eyes met Zarya's. "Let's just observe today. No pressure." Zarya nodded, but the pressure was already there. In her throat, her chest, her bones. They entered a quiet room filled with sensory toys and padded seats. Reed sat awkwardly to the side. Watching, Kylan stayed near Zarya at first. But as the minutes passed, something shifted. He looked at Reed, then, slowly, moved toward him. Dr. Russo said nothing, just made notes quietly as Kylan sat down beside the man. His breathing stayed steady. No tremors, no darting eyes, just calm. After an hour, Dr. Russo invited Zarya and Reed into her office. Her voice was gentle, but precise. "Kylan's silence isn't only from trauma. It's from fear. Specific, patterned fear of men." Zarya's eyes filled. "I knew that. I knew he was scared. But I didn't know it would last this long." Dr. Russo nodded. "That kind of fear doesn't just dissolve. It roots itself. Deep. Most children don't come back from it quickly. And certainly not around a man." She paused, then looked directly at Reed. "But with you?" She turned her tablet to face them. "Biofeedback results." His nervous system relaxed. Reed stared. "What does that mean?" Dr. Russo leaned forward slightly. "It means his body knows you're safe, before his mind does. That's rare, and it's meaningful." Reed didn't speak, not because he didn't believe it, but because something inside him cracked wide open. He was the man the boy didn't fear, the only one. Zarya's breath hitched, and then, without warning, the tears came. "I should have protected him," she whispered, voice cracking. "I should have known better. I shouldn't have stayed with his father that long. I thought I had time. I thought—" Her words dissolved into sobs. Reed stepped forward slowly, carefully, and sat beside her. He didn't speak right away. He didn't touch her, but he stayed. And that, somehow, meant more than any comfort she could have imagined. Then, softly, "You got him out," he said. "That's what matters." She looked at him, eyes red, breathing uneven. "But why you? Why does he trust you?" He shook his head. "I wish I knew." Behind them, Dr. Russo watched quietly, then said something that silenced them both. "Children do not attach by accident. Something in Reed's presence repairs what broke in him. Sometimes God sends the right person long before we understand why we needed them. If you believe every child deserves someone who stands in the gap for them, then stay with this story." Sabrielle finds out about the appointment, and now she's not just angry. She's ready to retaliate. The Montclair mansion glowed like something from a winter fairy tale. Chandeliers sparkled above guests dressed in velvet and gold, and snow drifted softly beyond the towering windows. Laughter echoed between champagne glasses and holiday jazz, while the scent of pine and polished silver filled the air. It was Christmas Eve, and Sabrielle Montclair was ready to destroy the night. Zarya moved quietly along the far wall, adjusting candles, refilling water glasses, keeping Kylan close by her side. He clutched a small wooden reindeer Reed had carved for him, tiny fingers moving over its smooth edges like a secret prayer. Sabrielle, in a crimson gown that demanded attention, waited until the music dipped and eyes drifted her way. Then, smiling sweetly, she struck. She raised her voice just enough to cut through the murmurs. "What a beautiful holiday we're having. Family. Friends." She let her eyes settle on Zarya, and maids manipulating their way into family gatherings. The room stilled. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Guests turned. Zarya froze. Sabrielle stepped forward slowly, her tone soft but razor-sharp. "I suppose if I'd known I could parade a child through trauma, I might have earned sympathy too." A soft gasp from the crowd. One guest whispered, "Is she talking about the maid?" Zarya stood frozen. the heat of humiliation crawling up her neck. Kylan looked up at her, confused, sensing the danger but not understanding the words. Sabriel continued, eyes locked on Reed now. You think no one notices how attached he is? How she's used that boy to get close to you? It's not affection, it's manipulation dressed in tragedy. Zaria's hands trembled. Her heart pounded in her ears. And then Kylan moved, tears already pooling in his eyes. He ran across the polished floor, through the wall of eyes and gasps, straight to Reed. He threw his arms around his leg, voice breaking, body trembling. Stay. One word, but it shattered the silence. A word he hadn't used in months. And he said it to Reed. The room shifted. Something unspoken passed through every guest. Sabriel paled. Reed reached down, scooping Kylan into his arms with a slow, steady grace. Then he turned. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. You don't decide my family. Sabriel's lips parted in disbelief. Excuse me? Reed didn't blink. Not anymore. Sabriel looked around, as if the room would come to her defense. No one moved. No one met her eyes. She turned on her heel and stormed out, heels clicking furiously against marble. The door closed behind her. And for the first time that evening, the air softened. Later, after the guests had resumed their laughter, though quieter now, Reed pulled Zaria aside near the staircase, Kylan still in his arms. She didn't know what to say. She had no words, only tears she wouldn't let fall in front of him. Reed looked at her not like a billionaire, not like a savior, but like someone who had finally stopped running from his own grief. You and Kylan are safe here, he said softly, as long as you want to be. Zaria nodded slowly, her hand brushing her son's curls, eyes filled with disbelief and something dangerously close to hope. Some stories don't test our patience, they test our compassion. And compassion means staying until the last page. Christmas morning brings a gift no one expected and a question no one is ready to answer. Snow fell gently over the Montclair terrace, cloaking the trees and stone rails in soft white. The mansion's Christmas lights glowed behind the frosted windows, their golden reflections flickering against the glass like firelight behind old stained glass. Zaria stood wrapped in a borrowed shawl, her breath curling in front of her, watching her son lean against the man who had once barely noticed them at all. Kylan rested against Reed's chest, warm, safe, asleep. His tiny fingers curled into the fabric of Reed's coat like they belonged there. No one spoke. There was nothing left to explain. Zaria turned to Reed, eyes full, voice barely more than a whisper. I never thought he'd trust anyone again. I never thought we'd find peace like this. Reed shook his head slowly. He saved me too. Zaria didn't respond. She couldn't. The ache in her chest wasn't pain anymore, it was the weight of something released. Something given back. Kylan stirred slightly, lifting his head. His little hand reached up and rested on Reed's cheek. That was all. No fanfare. No final words. Just a silent, sacred act of trust. Zaria covered her mouth as tears finally slipped down her cheeks. Reed didn't move. He just closed his eyes, resting his hand over Kylan's. A family, not spoken, not signed, but sealed. Behind the tall windows of the mansion, Sabriel watched. She stood alone, one hand holding the edge of the curtain, the other clenched at her side. Her face didn't twist in anger this time. Just quiet defeat. There was no undoing what had already taken root. Outside, the snow thickened soft, slow, sacred, and for the first time in years, Reed lowered his head and whispered a prayer. Not for riches, not for redemption. Just thanks. Some families aren't born. They're found in the winter moments when grace finally comes home. If you believe every child deserves a place where fear melts and love takes root, don't walk away from stories like this. Share them. Hold space for them. Let them matter.